There we go. All right, I think I'm recording. I hope I'm recording. We will see if I'm recording at the end. Okay. All right, so sorry, I just showed you half my head there. All right, so I want to encourage you to ask me questions as we go along. So if you get confused by anything, just tell me. And I'm recording this and then I'll send it as an email to you as well. And then I actually unearthed a 6-year-old version of this that Dr. Robbins did. And this was back when the comps was slightly different. So you can ignore all the stuff about how we talk about 3 questions and about coming on campus to do the questions and all that sort of stuff. But she gives more tips than I plan on giving about like the actual writing process. So I'll give a little bit of that, but I think she goes into way more detail than I plan to. Okay, so the first thing is to take this seriously. And I know the 3 of you who are sitting in here plan on doing that anyways, but just want to put it out there that this is a capstone for your master's. And so it's not something that needs to be entered into lightly. And we're expecting to see some of your best work. And so kind of the overall idea is that we're hoping that when you leave this master's program, that you are able to look at a question or an issue, analyze it systematically from multiple angles and bringing into consideration research. And we're also hoping that you can articulate yourself well in writing, as well as be careful of what you submit for your final product to show that you've proofread and that you're clear and all that sort of stuff. So you have, what is it? Is it 10 days or 12 days? I'm mixing myself up for the number of days.
I think it's 10 days.
10? Okay. So whatever the length is that Dr. Eckenrod Green will email you about, please be sure that you are working a little bit each day. I know that, at least 2 of you are going to be, or more who might be watching this later are student teaching. So I know that this complicates it in a way, but it's really not something that you can cram in the last weekend before it's due. It really needs to be something that you take your time, that you chunk it, that you maybe say to yourself, I'm going to work on this an hour each day, and then like over the weekend, I'm going to work on it X number of hours. So just kind of wanted to throw that in there. All right, so the first thing that I'm going to do is just kind of go over the rubric, because I think a lot of people jump into the writing without really looking at what we're hoping to see. And a question for you, is the screen that has all of your images on it, is it blocking part of the rubric for you?
A little bit.
Okay, so I'm going to see if I can move this part. I can move it. All right. There, I'm going to move it off to the side here. Also, I get distracted by looking at myself, so it's good for it to be away. Okay. So the first. Can you hear me still?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, so the first criterion is content knowledge, and we're looking to see, can you find good research? And when we say good research, we mean professionally legitimate sources. So hopefully you're going to the McConnell website and you're going and looking at the databases there, or you're looking through Google Scholar. This is not something that you can just do a Google search for. So, we're looking to look at the quality of your reference list, and then also within the document, that if you are, referencing something professionally legitimate source, and it's not, you're saying what you think it's saying. In other words, if an article says something like, all students have brown hair, and you represent it in a different way, it's not really supporting your claim. So just be sure that you're reading carefully the stuff, and that you're giving your attribution. In other words, you're saying, who said this, and when was it cited, and stuff like that. So that's kind of the first item, is that we just want to make sure you're looking at good sources. The second item, these next 2 sections that I'm going to talk about, these are really the meat of the issue. So you've already submitted a topic, or Jeter, in your case, this will apply for later, but Miranda and Brad, you've already submitted a topic to your committee. So you kind of know what the topic will be on for one of them. And for the other one, it is asking you to talk about like an issue that you could take multiple sides on. And so we're wanting to look to see, you know, is your knowledge, is it accurate, and do you have a fully developed response? Like, this rubric is really generic, and it's sort of on purpose because there is such a variety of questions, and we didn't want to have to keep remaking the rubric year after year. But you're really wanting to look for the target things, that you show that you're being reflective, that you're not coming across as absolutely certain about things. You know, you don't want to come across without qualifying your statements. You know, you don't want to say things like, you know, all kids should be duct taped to chairs. You know, you don't, I mean, of course that's an absurd position anyways, but, you know, you don't want to be so certain and not qualify it in some way. And the second point under the target demonstrates a holistic view of the disciplinary content. That just means, are you taking into consideration lots of populations? Are you taking into consideration different viewpoints, things like that? And you're also, the third item, you just don't be vague, you know. And again, I'm going to send you the one that Dr. Robbins did, and she goes into a little bit more detail on that. And you just want to be sure that you look over the question very carefully and make sure that you're answering all aspects of it. This next slide is, again, a continuation of, we're looking to see your content knowledge. Have you incorporated a critical analysis? And I put a little asterisk by that one. What we especially don't see sometimes from students is counter arguments. Like, for example, if they say, you know, I believe that we should have cell phones in class, you know, all they do is argue that we should have cell phones and never take into consideration, well, this is what opponents might say. So it's almost like you have to put your voodoo hat on, if you recall from my class, that you know, you're not wanting to go back and forth and thus make yourself unclear, but you also want to indicate to us that you have anticipated a little bit what the arguments will be, and you'll point out, you know, I anticipate that this might be a counter argument, but here's what I say in response. So you kind of incorporate that into things. Just going through the target items, highly original and creative, you know, you're not quoting every other line. So you're putting it into your own words, you're putting it into your own position. Reflective interrogation of disciplinary readings. That just means that you critically read, you know, some research in order to come to your conclusions. Incorporates critical analysis and synthesis of central, you know, this is all just critical thinking. Can you show us, again, that you have looked at an issue, researched it, and it can play with multiple viewpoints, and, you know, can apply this to a learning situation. Yeah, so that's so far. So any questions so far?
Not really a question so much as a comment. It reminds me a lot of the paper I had to do for my educational research class last semester. It's very similar. Dr. Robbins taught that, so
right. Yeah, there'll definitely be some similarities in terms of like the professionalism of it. You know, this is a very formal paper. You can use I, but use it sparingly. Kind of err on the side of not using it. But every now and then, particularly on the question that you get to have some say in the topic, that might be a lot more application, that it might be more appropriate to bring in I then. So just be sparing with that. Okay, so let's see, continuing on with the rubric here. So then the next two items on the rubric are really about the mechanics of the whole thing, the mechanics and the flow. Ideally, what we want is a paper that we can read quickly and easily. You know, in other words, that it's clear that we don't stop often and get confused, or don't stop often because we're tripping up on errors and things like that. So we actually get down to the nitty-gritty of actually counting the number of errors. So the target would be it's free or almost free of grammatical and mechanical errors. Your APA is used accurately and consistently, and that you provide page numbers and running heads. And you would be surprised at how many people forget that. And it's so, it's so simple just to put the page numbers in and a running head in. And a running head is just, it's a header with the title of your paper and some page numbers. So that's very simple to do. And then the next slide, actually, I think maybe I'm having a different version of this rubric, but there's another version maybe in this section where it's section headers. Like, we definitely recommend using section headers, and I'll talk about that in another slide in a second. But I guess it's not graded, but we do look for page numbers and running heads, but we would like to see subheadings as well. Okay, in the last section of the rubric is just, again, we want this to be an easy read for us. It should be something that's clear and we should be able to clock off pretty quickly. That means that your sentences are well phrased, that they're varied in length and structure, that in other words, in a paragraph, you don't have, the same word or phrase starting every sentence, like the school says this, the school says that. That can kind of make things seem choppy. So we want it to be arranged logically and that you have transitions between your sections, and try to make it as compelling and sustaining our interests as possible throughout. That's kind of the rubric. Are there any questions about the rubric overall?
No.
Okay. All right, so let me go to the next slide. So that's just kind of the basics. Let me get this out of the way. All right, so what your committee does with the rubric is that, so you'll send us your paper, and each member of your committee is going to score each paper independently with the rubric. And then we send our scores to the chair of the committee, and the chair calculates your average score for each question. So there's 3 possible outcomes. The best possible outcome is to get a score of 85 to 100 overall amongst all your committee members, which is a clear pass, and all you get then is an email that says, congratulations, you have satisfied us with this written work. You have passed your comprehensive. I would say that happens maybe 10% of the time, maybe